wanted to talk a bit about another experience I had in the congregation in the north of the town. There was a really lovely brother there, very humble in spirit. And one day he happened to give me a lift home, and talking, he took me by surprise. He came up with the statement that he wouldn't be in the new system. He wouldn't be in the new world. He said, I'm going to be in heaven. And I'd been in the congregation for some time with this man, and it took me by surprise him coming out with it like that, because he didn't partake so far as I knew. Anyway, this man passed away now about a year and a half ago, natural causes. And I was talking to somebody who knew him quite well, and I explained what had happened some years prior to this person, and they said to me, oh, he did partake once, but the elders spoke to him afterwards and he never did it again. So it got me to thinking, well, maybe it was just pressure from the organisation that he didn't ever partake again. This man was known to have a mental illness. You could see in him, his personality used to just completely change. He'd dress out of character, talk out of character. I mean, he was still a nice guy, but he wasn't a quiet, humble, kind of shy person. He was really kind of outgoing, outspoken, used to say things, sometimes it didn't make sense, and do things sometimes it didn't make sense. Anyway, then he'd gradually get back to his normal self again, and he was like this, on and off, for as long as I knew him. But yeah, when I found out that he had been a memorial partaker, I just thought, well, what right does the organisation have to discriminate against people with mental illness? Because that's what they're doing. They're saying that in a roundabout way, if you've had a mental illness or suffer in the past or currently suffer from a mental illness, then you're just plain mad. You can't be genuinely of the anointed. Who are they to say that? What right have they got to bar heaven's gates to anybody with that kind of so-called mental illness? They really just have no right. They're out of order. And this man, somebody who really was a person you would say was a vulnerable person, needed more than anything their support and encouragement, but instead he got battered down with all the kinds of things that they taught in the Watchtower. As well, going back to the town centre congregation, I wanted to relate the experience I had one day being out in the ministry. And there was a group of us, we met together, and one of the sisters was an elder's wife. And this sister, at this particular day, had her hand wrapped in a bandage from her knuckles to upwards to her wrist. And she said something had happened to her. I can't remember what it was, but I know I didn't think too much about it at the time. But what happened some months later, she also had her leg bandaged. From the foot through the ankle up to her knee was wrapped in a bandage. And she gave some lame excuse like she'd bumped into a chair. That's what she said. And I wasn't buying it. I thought her husband's hitting her, her husband's beating her up. Anyway, those times I didn't make too much of a connection between an elder behaving like that to his wife and the spirit leaving the congregation. It was only afterwards the penny dropped. So, by which time I was in my original congregation in the north of the town, And I'd actually seen this sister as well after I'd left the congregation with another bandage on her hand, and I thought, boy, yeah, her husband's been beating her up again. But yeah, when the circuit overseer next came to the congregation, I mentioned this to him, and that, you know, had to leave it with him. And to my knowledge, that congregation stayed in a sickly state for some years. And I do believe at one point there was a request for brothers who were able to move and support that congregation. Anyway, fast forward now to 4 years ago, I moved house again. Ended up back in Town Centre Territory. And as an ex-Jehovah Witness, I ended up protesting more outside the congregation than sitting in it. I watched the comings and goings of brothers and sisters. Sometimes the meeting attendance was really good, and other times it, you know, was really bad. So, you know, I wasn't quite sure what to make out about the condition of the congregation, but I did know that a brother who was in a congregation up north of the town travelled all the way to the town centre congregation to support it. So that told me that the congregation was still in a state where it needed support. But the brother who I knew had been a wife batterer, he had left. He was no longer in that congregation, so I couldn't quite figure out why the congregation still needed help. I thought maybe something else was some sort of immorality or fornication or adultery. Maybe that was going on in the congregation and it had